If you were the devil, how would you keep people as far away from God as possible without them realizing it?
Well, if I were the devil, I'd start by corrupting mainstream religion.
And that's exactly what's happening today. So, end of the episode, we're done. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I am dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, we're going to discuss how the devil works. And this is key because we are all in a spiritual battle. It would always be good to know how the enemy operates. And to help us, we're going to ask artificial intelligence, or basically acquired intelligence / AI. And before we jump into it, please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. And please support us on our Patreon community so that we can continue to dish out this conversation that hopefully gives you some pastoral insights. And then also, as a member of Patreon, you get access to some great perks and great content. So let's just jump right into it now with a discussion in this brevisode on what AI can teach us about the evil one. If you're familiar with that classic book by C.S. Lewis called the Screwtape Letters, you're going to hear about how the devil is having a conversation with another devil and teaching that younger demon how to do the work of evil, contrary to God. And we have to just recognize first and foremost that we are in a battle, a spiritual battle. I sometimes begin my talks at parish missions, for example, when I'm giving talks on spiritual combat, I'll ask, how many people experience temptation? And they'll raise their hand, and I'll say, and I'm talking like great temptation, the most disgusting, vile temptations in church. And you'll see a lot of hands drop. And I challenge people because the greatest saints experience terrible persecution and temptations by the evil one, simply because temptations are just not only a part of life, it's a tool of the evil one to distract us from trying to live a good and holy life. And sometimes we succumb to those temptations. Sad, but our broken human nature is prone to fall. That concupiscence is always going to be with us, but grace will always prevail. But one of the ways that grace prevails is through knowledge, through wisdom, through an insight. Basically, learning the ways of God requires us to learn the ways of the devil. It just requires us to know that. I'm not saying to engage it or to relish in it, but we have to admit that you have to know your enemy. And the most powerful way we can learn that technique of the evil one is called prayer. It's just being very humble in all the struggles that you go through. But sometimes people just want a quick answer, and that's why we're going to turn to AI with this little video.
If you were the devil, how would you keep people as far away from God as possible without them realizing it?
Well, if I were the devil, I'd start by corrupting mainstream religion, turning it into a tool for control, hypocrisy, and division. I'd twist sacred teachings into rules that breed judgment and fear, driving people away from faith and making them question the authenticity of God's message. I'd divide believers against one another, creating conflict within their own community so they'd focus on fighting each other rather than seeking unity or truth. I'd then create distractions that seem harmless but consume their attention, pulling them away from spiritual growth. I'd promote materialism, convincing them that happiness comes from possessions. I'd encourage a culture of busyness, leaving little time for reflection or connection with the divine. And finally, I'd ensure that doubt and fear overshadow faith and love so they become too disillusioned to ever seek a higher power.
Wow.
And that's exactly what's happening today. So, end of the episode, we're done. But I'm going to summarize it for you because it is true. And all of this is contained in the Screwtape Letters, but it's also kind of written in our hearts. We know the difference between right and wrong. We know that. And we also need moral character and judges, basically teachers, who can help us define more clearly the differences between good and evil. But if this AI and is accurate, and I certainly believe it is, and there are probably other ways, but I thought that this was an incredible summary. An incredible summary. First talks about confusion, just confusion, because there are a lot of people who are not only confused, they are perfectly ignorant in what we as Catholics believe. And then it says, take the good teachings that we have and turn them in such a way that it creates a sense that we're judging other people, and it increases fear. And it is true that there are going to be some things in the Catholic Church that cause people to think that we are judging them, and then therefore they fear us and, in a sense, reject and even hate us. And so we have to look pastorally in how we are presenting the hard topics. I remember very clearly a very good Catholic couple who just seemed so, for lack of a better term, mean. They were trying to do everything right, but they became so judgmental that they just came across as mean. And to be honest, I don't want to be a Catholic like that couple. It took a lot of work for me to soften their hearts, honestly, to soften their hearts. But it does happen. AI also continued and talked about how this fear will create, even amongst Christians, division so that we fight against each other and not against the evil one. And boy, has that happened. I mean, I remember I was at a world meeting of families in Philadelphia, and I was walking down the street to get to my car, and these Protestants started to literally verbally attack me because I had my collar on, and I was actually willing to talk with them. And boy, they wanted nothing to do with me. In fact, I even asked if we could pray the Our Father together, and they wouldn't do it, simply because they didn't think that the way I was praying was correct, and that only they knew how to pray it correctly. Just real evil. And AI has just revealed that whenever there is division and we start fighting against each other, even amongst Catholics, there are people in the Catholic Church that are stoking the division just to argue with one another. We've got to come together and seek unity and peace. That is a command of Jesus. Another one is distractions are all around us. It's the God's honest truth. So if technology is distracting you, then put it down, unless you're using technology for good things. Hopefully, you're using technology to watch my show. But let's just admit, there are so many shiny, glitzy things that we can easily be distracted, and we stop practicing, and it does take practice, the present moment, to be able to stay right here, right now. But the distractions are all around us. AI also talked about materialism and how materialism is a way to evil because we cannot serve both God and mammon. We have to put our money where our mouth is. You know, people make a lot of money, but they don't actually do good with it. They just continue to fill up their grain barns with stuff that they are going to have no control over when God calls them home. So live a simpler life, honestly. Stay away from brand names. If you want to get something quality, that's understandable, but make sure that it is not only worth it, but it doesn't define you, and at the same time, if you want to avoid materialism, consider how you would, if something is valuable, like for example, I read this in one of my books on how to stay in the mindset of poverty, that if something costs $10, but you don't need it, but you like it, fine, get it. But then also dedicate $10 and give it to the poor. It kind of makes you think, do I really need this thing? Because I could also do something good with this $10. So maybe you go for something that only costs $5. And that is how to avoid materialism. Another one is busyness. And boy, do I face this. And it really does sometimes in my busyness challenges me to take the full time that I've allotted for prayer and use it for prayer. That's all there is to it. We sometimes use busyness as an excuse, I'm too busy to go to church. And I remember Cardinal Dolan, when he was my rector at the North American College as a seminarian, he said, if you're too busy for church, then you're just too busy. And you got to cut some of this stuff out, because we all need to take some time in order to make an appointment with God. Because again, AI was asked, how would you take people away from God? Busyness. And then comes the attitudes of doubt and fear. And these are, in a sense, the presumptions and the despair that God can't be with you, that God doesn't want to be with you, that God doesn't want to forgive you, redeem you, and love you. We have to fight against that, because our world loves doubt and fear, loves promoting it, because when it does, then it can sell you something to make you less doubtful and more fearful, or less fearful. So we got to think to ourselves, what are we afraid of? We need to talk to God about that. And trust me, your prayer is so powerful that you don't actually even need AI, because remember, all of these things have been written even before AI was created. It was captured in a lot of the books of spiritual combat, but also in, for example, I'd recommend you reading the Screwtape Letters. But God has already taught us how to conquer evil. Really, it's already written in our hearts. And it's very simple. You just simply say, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And when you trust that God's will be done in you, you can be victorious in the battle, because the war has already been won by Jesus Christ. I hope that this episode is helpful to you. Please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. Let us know what your thoughts are. Help us to overcome the algorithm suppressions, and please support us on Patreon, because it's the only way that we can continue to dish out faith, culture, and commentary. God bless you, and stay hungry for God.